Good afternoon, good evening. We're just going to wait about a minute or so before we start our presentation.
Okay, I'm going to get going. Good afternoon, good evening, brothers and sisters. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the IUBAC's Safety Webinar Series. In our webinar series, the International Union's Health and Safety Department, along with our colleagues from IMTEF, endeavor to cover the implementation of best practices to keep our members safe from job site hazards. With that, in recognition of OSHA's National Safety Stand-Down to prevent falls in the construction, held May 1st through May 5th earlier this month, BAC's Health and Safety Department deemed it fitting to continue that conversation with today's webinar entitled Fall Protection, ABCDEs. During OSHA's National Stand-Down on falls, many workers took a break during the course of their workday to focus on fall hazards to reinforce the importance of fall protection. As we know, the purpose and desired effect of these stand-downs are to draw awareness to the issue of fall protection and to keep workers mindful of the existence of these job site hazards. In 2021, fatalities caused by falls from an elevation continues to be the leading cause of death for construction employees, accounting for 378 of the 986 construction fatalities as recorded by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Those deaths were preventable. The National Safety Stand-Down raises fall hazard awareness across the country in an effort to stop fall fatalities and injuries. As you may be aware, fall hazards from an elevated surface is the #1 OSHA safety violation on construction sites for the 12th year in a row. It is also one of the leading causes of fatalities in our industry, which is especially alarming considering that 3 BAC brothers lost their lives in 2001 due to a fall. We never want to hear that our brothers or sisters have lost their lives or have been severely injured due to a fall. We want every BAC member that goes to work to come home to their loved ones in the same condition as they left their home. That is why we have committed to holding these educational webinars as part of a series for BAC members and leaders throughout the year and share resources, tips, best practices to better help us understand how we can all stay safe while on a work site. So I would again like to thank you for taking the time to join this important webinar, to implement and share what you learn with other members and your coworkers. So let's get started. I am Jerry Sullivan, Secretary-Treasurer of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, and I am joined today by our panelist, Liliana Calderon, the IU Director of Health and Safety Programs, Donkin, IMTEF South Regional Training and Safety Director, and Dan Flores, IMTEF's North Central Training and Safety Director. Together, they will discuss fall protection and personal fall arrest systems, as well as share valuable resources to keep us safe while working from elevated surfaces. Just a few housekeeping items that I would like to mention. This webinar will be recorded, will be made available on the IU Safety website for you to view and share with our brothers and sisters. We will hold a question and answer session at the conclusion of the presentations. To ask a question, please tap the Ask Question button. Enter your question to the question and answer box, tap the send button, and send your question to the host. The panel will answer your question live on this webinar. With that, let's get started. I'll hand it over to Lily.
Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Secretary-Treasurer Sullivan. So, next slide, please. So why fall protection? Falls accounted for 42% or 325 of the 768 fatalities included in the construction FACE database. FACE stands for Fatality Assessment and Control Evaluation Database, which studies fatal workplace injuries and prepares reports and with recommendations to prevent similar deaths. They can be found on OSHA.gov website. I do want to note that these statistics are from 2020, so you can see the earlier Secretary-Treasurer Sullivan told you about some statistics from 2021. They're still up there in numbers, so it's very important to protect ourselves from falls. Second bullet here, 1/3 of the fatal falls were from heights over 30 feet and 26% from heights of 15 feet or less. Personal fall arrest systems were not available to more than half of the fall decedents, or about 54%. Nearly 1 in 4 fall decedents, 22%, have access to personal fall arrest systems, but were not using it at the time of the fall. This is a very important bullet point. Training and hazard awareness would have been invaluable as to why the personal fall arrest systems are needed. Sometimes workers feel that they don't need it, or as we sometimes know this phrase, I just need to do this one little thing and the unbelievable happens. It's very important to be trained on the hazard as well as how to properly protect yourself from a potential fall. 70% were among residential building contractors and roofing, siding, and sheet metal sectors contractors. Though most of fall fatalities happen in the residential sector, that does not mean that there aren't commercial construction falls. When we are exposed to a fall, it does not matter where we are working, whether it's residential or commercial. So when do we need fall protection? In the construction industry, working at a height of 6 feet triggers the need for fall arrest system. A fall arrest system must be rigged to the worker so he cannot free fall for more than 6 feet. It should also bring an employee to a complete stop and limit the employee's max deceleration distance to 3.5 feet. This is OSHA's minimum requirement. Some general contractors have a 100% tie-off policy. Each general contractor is different. Please make sure to know the GC's policy on working at heights so that you can adequately prepare. Now we will go over the ABCDEs of fall protection. Next slide, please. I will begin with A, anchorage and anchor points. Required strength of an anchorage connector must be able to withstand a force of 5,000 pounds for each worker that is attached. It shall be independent of any other anchorages. You can have anchorage that can be either permanent or temporary. I'd also like to note that the anchor point should be reachable without exposing yourself to a hazard. It should also be located to prevent contact with a lower level hazard in case of a fall. So you want to make sure it is well above your head. The anchorage device provides a secure point of attachment like an existing structure, for example, for the fall arrest system. This is a crucial component of the system, choosing the correct anchor point and anchorage to suit the working condition. The anchorage serves as a connecting point for the connecting device that we will be discussing later. Next slide, please. These types of anchorage are temporary, used for specific tasks and then removed or moved to a new location. We see here on the left a choker anchor strap that can be used around beams. We do want to make sure that we protect the strap from the sharp edges of a beam that can cause the strap to be cut. We can use burlap, or they do sell beam strap protectors that go between the strap and the beam. In the middle, we have an adjustable beam clamp, very easy to set up and use. And finally, on the right, we have a concrete anchor connector. The way this works, typically a 3/4 inch hole is drilled into the concrete, and then the device is placed in and it is set up for use. It can easily be removed and used again. Next slide, please. And these are examples of a permanent anchorage. On the left, we have a permanent rooftop anchorage, and on the left and on the right, we have a facade access for rooftops. These are instances where anchorage points are engineered in the design of the building. These are extremely helpful when working on the roof. I will now pass it on to Dave Donkin, who will go over the B and the C of fall protection. Dave.
Thank you, Lily. So We've moved on from A, we've talked about anchorage, so now we're going to head into B, which is the full body harness. As you can see in the picture are some different types of harnesses that you generally might see on a construction site. The design is to hold the wearer upright in the event of a fall from a height. It is also to distribute the energy generated from a fall across the wearer's body. They come in various sizes to accommodate all sizes of people, including harnesses designed specifically for women. They may be specialized based off of application in industries such as confined spaces, positionings, etc. Also, a point to mention is the way that the harness is designed. It is designed to take the full brunt of the pressure away from smaller parts of the body and distribute that weight amongst bigger masses, body parts, etc. The shoulders being one, the thighs, areas in which you have a lot more mass and are the larger bones in your body. That's the way the harness is designed, so that in the event of a fall, the harness is using those parts of the body that are bigger in mass to absorb a lot of the pressure that for when you fall into a harness. So it's across the shoulders, the pelvis, and the thighs, where we have a lot of that mass that can actually hold the weight, from the forces from in a fall. Just as mentioned prior in the previous slide, that there are different types of harnesses for different applications. Some of the examples are here, or you might have a type A, which is for fall arrest connections, P, which is positioning, pole climbing, and form work. You might see these type of harnesses that have D-rings that are more on the hips or in the center of the chest for positioning to keep you in place. Descent, D, for an emergency evacuation, E for exit, for confined space access, L for ladder climbing, and R for rescue, for tower rescue. There are some harnesses that actually are made which could encompass actually every single one of these types. You will be able to find that on the tag on the harness. When you're doing your inspection, the tag would actually describe what type of harness it would be used for. It would be able to tell you the different types of applications that can be used in the type and name. Here, we just have a picture when we talk about the proper wearing of a harness. As you can see on the left, you can see that the dorsal ring is pretty much down closer to lower than the middle of the back, actually closer to the waist. And you have the one on the right, which is closer to the middle of the back, in between the shoulder blades. This one actually is wrong, and this one is actually correct. And the reason why is because in the event of a fall, the D-ring, in the event of the fall, the D-ring is going to be actually, in the descent, is going to be somewhere up over the shoulders, even possibly above the head. And what happens to that way is when you into a fall, if the harness was improperly worn, number one, you could almost slide right all out of it. And it almost, in a sense, it wouldn't even be worth having it on because it would be worn improperly. Second is when you fall, your body momentum is going to push you forward. And we want that D-ring up above the top of your head because it's going to make you hang more vertically. If it was closer down to your waist, you're going to be hanging more horizontally. At that point, trauma is going to set in, and at that point, you're not even able actually to even possibly self-rescue yourself because you wouldn't be able to get to your emergency straps, if you had them, you wouldn't be able to grab possibly anything that was out in front of you because of the way that you would be hanging. So it's very, very important to make sure that when you're donning and doffing a harness, that number one, that you're trained by a competent person who is well aware of the proper use of fall protection. And at that point, sizing the harness to make sure that you are fitting it properly. Not only just the D-ring in the front, but the positioning of the straps across the leg, like we talked about in the previous slide about where those straps sit on your thighs. All of that would be done during the donning and doffing process of properly wearing a harness and covered by a competent person who has the knowledge for fall protection. This slide, I like to show this a lot because I think it's not funny in any sense, but it just shows we have miles to go when it comes to education about educating someone properly about the use of fall protection, right? You can only imagine what would happen if someone was to fall being rigged in this manner. They might as well have not had anything on at all, to be honest with you. So one other point of reference is inspection and care. We have to keep in mind that harnesses and straps are made by their synthetic fibers. They're man-made. They will break down over time, especially if they're exposed to caustics, oils, or any type of chemicals. Will just extenuate that process and quicker, and they will start to break down. Along with that, also as well, simply exposure to UV lighting, UV light rays will also start to break it down. You can see in these particular two slides, you can see the obvious nature of the inspection and what was found during the inspection. And to be honest with you, it's not always like this obvious, right? That's why it takes being trained by a competent person about what the things to look for when you're looking for inspection and care. And also a point of reference that daily and before each shift is when these harnesses should be inspected to make sure that they're in proper condition. And again, just like anything else, the proper care and storage will obviously allow for the longevity of the harnesses to last a lot longer if they're well taken care of. Again, inspect the webbing for wear, cuts, burns, and frays. It just doesn't stop with the webbing. It talks about all the components of the harness, any of the buckles, stitching, etc. So it's a fairly long process, but certainly warranted. This slide is just an example of some of the different, we're moving on to C. We've covered A, B, now we're on to C, and C is connectors. These are just some examples of some different type of connectors. You have lanyards that come in 4 to 5 to 6 foot lengths. They are adjustable. They can come in steel, web, synthetic 3-strand rope, and they can come with or without the shock absorber. This picture right here is the self-retracting lifeline, mostly used for anchoring overhead, and also to minimize swing fall, and they retract when they're not in use. The self-retracting lanyards are a flexible line of rope, wire rope, or strap, which generally has a connector at each end. They're designed to prevent free fall, more fall prevention, less fall arrest, right? They're trying to prevent you from free fall. And similar to self-retracting lifelines, but they're sized a little bit smaller for movement and such. So this is
Yep, I'll take this over.
Gonna pick up from here, Dan?
Yeah, I'll take this over.
Gotcha.
So some of you may have seen this demonstration before, either online or in person. This demonstration was held out at the National Training Center in Bowie. Let's go ahead and play the video, Dave.
I took the weight up halfway. How far are we going to free fall here? 2 feet. Even though you're allowed to free fall, how far? 6. We're only going to free fall 2, and let's see what happens. So once again, here is our 310-pound guy in just a 2-foot fall. And I don't think I actually took that up halfway. I think it's a little shy of 2 feet, but doesn't matter. Here we go. Can you read that? 3,879 pounds just hit your body, whether you like it or not.
So this video really shows the force and impact the body will take in the event of a fall. Imagine falling the full free fall distance of 6 foot and the impact that would have on us. In this video, he only pulled up that weight 2 foot. We've already reviewed the harness system and components, including the need for inspection and what to look for. But what good is that if we have such a huge impact on our body? Next slide. Fortunately for us, there's still another component to go over, and that is the deceleration device. The deceleration device's main purpose is to absorb or minimize the impact on the body in the event of a fall. This device can deploy to a maximum of 3.5 feet. So this extra distance is important to figure when determining the correct connectors like Dave talked about earlier. If improperly calculated, the deceleration device won't have enough distance to deploy and could cause serious injury to the person in the personal fall arrest system. The deceleration device is always also placed above the D-ring and not near the anchor point. Next slide. With the impact shown here on this slide, these deceleration devices should be inspected daily and taken out of service if it has been previously deployed or stretched. Now let's take a look at the second part of this demonstration, this time with a higher fall distance and with a deceleration device attached. Next slide.
Well, let's drop first. So, again, same 310-pound guy, but this time in a 4-foot free fall. And let's see what happens. You read that? We generated well over that 3,800 pounds of the first drop, but you're only left with 575 pounds.
So we can see a huge difference to the impact on our body with the implementation of a properly working deceleration device. I think we can all agree that on the importance of inspecting the personal fall arrest systems to ensure they are working in order for our safety. Next slide. Under Subpart M fall protection, OSHA says the employer shall provide for prompt rescue of employees in the event of a fall, or shall assure the employees are able to rescue themselves. Suspension trauma is the development of symptoms and loss of consciousness if the human body is held motionless in the vertical position for a period of time. The danger begins when someone is unable to move for as little as 3 minutes. So what happens if a worker has fallen and their legs are immobile? Well, gravity pools our blood into our legs. If the muscles are not pumping the blood upward, it pools in our legs. So you can lose or pool several pints of blood into our legs and go into shock. After a few minutes, your brain goes for this last-ditch effort and tells itself, if I faint, I'll fall over and I'll get the blood back. So the brain assumes that if you faint, you must fall over. If you stay upright without your blood pumping, your brain has no oxygen supply, your airway is at risk, and you'll probably die within 10 minutes. But how long do we really have? Well, it's tough to tell, and everyone's body is different. It could be 3 minutes, could be 30 minutes. It's difficult to put a timeline on deaths, however. So some research has shown that death can result in as little as 10 minutes, more typically probably between a 15 to 40 minute in a suspension, post-suspension fall. Which brings us back to the importance of a rescue plan. This video demonstrates a self-rescue method created by 3M. Let's take a look. So we had nice, smooth descent. The individual in the fall was able to self-rescue himself, deploy up to 100 feet to the ground. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lily to go over some resources.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dave. I really hope that this review has helped in understanding the complete system of a personal arrest system, giving you a better idea of what to look for when choosing an anchor point, where to place it, how to make sure the system is working properly, and how to care for all the individual components. As Secretary-Treasurer Sullivan mentioned early on, we put this webinar together to follow OSHA's 10th annual national stand down on falls that was held earlier this month. I know that the event has passed, and I still wanted to share with you this slide with information and the QR code that would direct you to the National Stand Down page on falls. It's filled with great resources and information on many commonly asked questions. I encourage you to please take a look. All this information is great. I mean, they have tons of it. Next slide, please. Also, on May 1st, OSHA announced a new national emphasis program on falls. This NEP is meant to prevent and reduce workplace falls. For the last 12 years, as mentioned by Secretary-Treasurer Sullivan, it has been the top #1 most cited citation and the #1 in fatalities. Falls to lower level has accounted for 13% of all worker fatalities between 2014 and 2021. In our industry, falls to a lower level caused 32% of all fatalities in the same period. The goal of this NEP is to significantly reduce or eliminate unprotected worker exposures to a fall-related hazard through a combination of increased enforcement, outreach efforts, and compliance assistance. Our industry is filled with many hazards that can change from day to day, hour by hour, minute by minute. But if we have the proper training and recognizing them, we can help eliminate those risks. We want to do everything we can to make sure that everyone of our members and every worker goes home safely to their loved ones each and every day. Next slide. I'd like to thank you, all of you, for following our series and joining us today to learn more about the ABCDs of fall protection. I would now like to open up the room to a question and answer session that Secretary-Treasurer will be doing. All our contact information is on the screen if you'd like to get in contact with any one of us for assistance or questions. Thank you again, and now I will hand it off to Secretary-Treasurer Sullivan to lead the Q&A session. Jerry.
Thank you, Lily. Thanks to Dave and Dan as well for a really incredible and informative presentation. So let's get started now with the question and answers. If you haven't already, you can submit any questions you may have for our panel using the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. One question that was raised, and this question's for Dan. You mentioned the word prompt in the rescue. Is there a specific time frame OSHA requires a person suspended from a fall to be rescued?
So after the initial fall, the other hazard we talked about was suspension trauma, right? And OSHA does say a prompt manner. That being said, OSHA does not have a specific time identified other than being rescued quickly. So in time to prevent serious injury to the worker, in this case, which would be any injuries also incurred during the fall. But then also we reviewed the importance of just how detrimental and how serious suspension trauma can be. So there needs to be a plan, and really 911 should not be the plan.
Thanks, Dan. We have another question. Am I responsible for having my own personal arrest system? And I'll turn to Lily for that.
Good, thank you. So no, you're not responsible for getting your own personal arrest system. It is the employer's responsibility to provide proper PPE whenever you are exposed to a hazard. But please keep in mind that the PPE that you're wearing must fit correctly. Proper fit is a must. I mean, it's an absolute must if you want the equipment to work correctly, right? If it doesn't fit correctly, it could cause a greater hazard, like in the event of a fall. If your harness is not fitted, kind of like what Dan was saying earlier, if the harness isn't fitted correctly, the chest strap can potentially ride up and cause a choking hazard. The leg strap's not fitted snugly around your thighs can cause construction of blood flow. So it is the employer's responsibility to provide you with proper PPE, but it is up to you to make sure that it fits correctly. And if it doesn't, to talk to the employer so you can get the proper PPE that fits you.
Okay, thanks, Lily. Another question that we received, where is the ideal place to anchor to? Above your head or below your feet? And what type of connectors should you use? So for this, on Dave, because Dave spoke about it, and he's the only one that hasn't answered the question yet.
All right, thanks, Jerry. So because of additional accidents involving falling into a harness, you've had additional accidents that come about that, other injuries, basically what we like to call the pendulum effect, right? So now that you've fallen, you've created a pendulum effect, and there's been many more accidents where it's just the fall wasn't enough. It's strike, now it becomes a fall and another, it's basically swinging into something, being knocked unconscious, et cetera, things of that nature. So OSHA and ANSI got together and they've basically created two different types of SRLs, self-retracting lifelines, a class 1 and a class 2. The class 1 are basically for anchor points that are above the D ring and above, and then class 2 are for those class 1s also limit your free fall to only 2 feet, right? So you can only fall 2 feet with a class 1 SRL. Class 2 are for anchor points that you cannot access it. Pretty much you can't, if you can use it overhead, you can, but if there's no access to an overhead, you would be basically the D ring and below. So you would have something like below below the D ring, closer down to your feet. And then that limits you also to a 6 foot free fall, which OSHA says that's the max, right? 6 foot is the max that you can free fall. So I guess the third part of that is either a lanyard, like basically what type of connector should you use? Either a lanyard or an SRL will work, but the conditions really determine which connector is best suited, and that's based on the surroundings and doing a fall clearance distance assessment. Basically, it gives you a clear picture of using the height of the worker, the height of the worker, the safety factor, the deceleration distance, and basically where your D-ring is going to be after the fall, which is basically around 2 feet. You know, when you fall, it's going to be above your head. So you should do an assessment to basically see, you know, where you're going to hit where your anchor point's going to be, where you're needed to hook up to basically so that you won't strike the lower level, right? Or create a pendulum effect to hit something, you know, back and forth. So, but a good way to determine that is if you go to you download Harness Hero, which is a pretty good. It's in the App Store. It's a pretty good thing to show you how to you know, use the right harness in the right position and calculate your clear distance. So that's you can get that on Android or Apple. It's called Harness Hero. It's a pretty good thing. So
can I
go ahead?
I was just going to add, you know, when you're choosing your lanyard, you want to choose a lanyard, the shortest lanyard possible, you know, because like Dave was saying, right, you assess what you're doing and how, you know, where you are in height. You assess everything. If you have a longer lanyard, let's say you're up 10 feet, you've got a 6-foot lanyard, you're at, you know, 6 feet, that's 12 feet. That lanyard's not going to open up. You already hit the ground before that even opened up, you know, because that's 12 feet. So you want to choose a lanyard that's the shortest available, hopefully.
And I just like to clarify on the rescue plan, 911 should not be your only plan to get them down. You're obviously going to use them in conjunction with a fall, but we need to have another means and an actual plan to also rescue a worker in the event of a fall. I didn't want to say that 911 should not be used. 911 should obviously be used.
Yeah, and I mean, for rescuing, you know, you can have cages that are set up for lows, different things you can set up with the GC. Sometimes they have different things, a crane with a cage to go up and get someone. So you got to coordinate that in too, right? So 911 shouldn't be your only option. 911 can be 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes out. And by that time, you know, that person that's hanging might already, you know, unfortunately not make it that long.
Yeah.
So you're going to have all these different things going on. I mean, for me, you want to have plan A, plan B, plan C, you know, keep going and just make sure that, you know, access is available.
I think the EM 385, which is for the military, you have to have means of self-rescue, meaning they have to be trained in self-rescue. They have to be able to know or have some type of ancillary device that's going to help them in a self-rescue operation. So, and that's for military installments, right? So they're basically OSHA bumped up on steroids a little bit more. They just increase it a little bit, right?
Great.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the question and answer section, unless I'm missing it. But before I close, I'd like to ask Lily or any of the panelists if they'd like to anything further.
I'll just add that you know, we continue to have these webinars. You can obviously, if you want to share or revisit any of our past webinars or this one, you can log on to bacweb.org/safety and you know, view them and share them. The more we can share this information out, the better our members will be out there working safely. Also, we will have a webinar next month on mass climbers. The date has not been set, but we will send that out to you when we do. Just keep in mind to stay safe and, you know, by sharing all these resources that we have for you. And if you have any questions or comments or you need any assistance, please reach out.
So great. I'd like to thank Lily, Dave, and Dan for the important work on the IUBAC's safety webinar series. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar and will use this information as a reminder and a resource to practice job safety. So the International Union appreciates your participation, and we hope you found the information useful. Feel free to reach out to Lily, Dave, Dan, more information about this or any other safety related topic if you have any concerns about. So other than that, I'll close by saying thank you to everyone and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.